The hidden signal. What if the worst sign in a relationship isn't yelling, or cheating, or even lying? What if it's silence? Not the peaceful kind. Not the kind where two people can sit together in comfort and stillness, but the heavy kind. The kind of silence that feels like walking on eggshells, where you pause before speaking, where your voice gets smaller without you noticing, where you constantly edit yourself, afraid of being too much, afraid of triggering an argument, or worse, being ignored. That silence is the symptom of something deeper, something toxic, something invisible at first, but corrosive over time. You may think you're being mature by avoiding conflict. You may tell yourself that you're keeping the peace, that you're choosing your battles. But if you're always choosing silence, if you're always shrinking to keep the other person comfortable, you're not in a relationship. You're in a slow suffocation. People imagine toxicity as shouting, jealousy, slammed doors. But the most dangerous kind? It's subtle. It's the moment you stop being yourself. The moment you feel like you have to earn your partner's love every single day. The moment their approval becomes your oxygen. You start to second-guess everything. You feel guilty for needing things. You apologize for emotions that are completely valid. And the person across from you? They never raise their voice. They never insult you directly. But they make you feel small, less than, replaceable. They weaponize your kindness, your empathy, your desire to keep the peace. And by the time you realize it, you've already lost pieces of yourself. Not all at once, but slowly, quietly, unnoticeably. Until one day, you look in the mirror and don't recognize who you've become. That's the red flag no one talks about. Not control, not abuse, not betrayal, but disappearance. The disappearance of your voice, your needs, your identity. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Part 2. The disappearance of self-relationships are supposed to grow you, not erase you. But so many people stay in dynamics where they're slowly dissolving because it doesn't look like abuse. There are no bruises, no yelling, no chaos, just an ongoing erosion of the soul. You used to laugh louder, sleep deeper, think clearer. Now you're hyper-aware of every word you say, every text you send, every facial expression you make. You've become a version of yourself that exists solely to not upset the other person. And the most dangerous part? You think it's normal. You've been conditioned to believe that love is hard, that it requires sacrifice, that no relationship is perfect. And while those things are partially true, they don't justify becoming invisible. Healthy love never requires you to vanish. It doesn't require you to constantly explain why you're upset and still be blamed. It doesn't mean you walk away from every conversation feeling more confused than when it started. It doesn't mean you become the only emotional adult in the relationship, holding space for both of you while you starve in silence. Ask yourself, why are you always the one adapting? Why do your needs feel like burdens while theirs feel like law? Why do you have to prepare them emotionally just to have a normal conversation? It's not love if only one person is allowed to feel safe. It's not love if you're always the one apologizing, explaining, shrinking. Real love isn't something that makes you doubt your own reality. And yet, when you're in a manipulative relationship, doubt is the air you breathe. You start questioning whether you're overreacting, whether you're just too sensitive, whether maybe it's your fault. But listen closely. Confusion is not a love language. You were not put on this earth to decode someone's passive aggression, to manage someone else's moods, to regulate their ego just so they don't shut down on you. That's not love. That's emotional labor dressed as loyalty. And here's the hard truth. If the relationship requires you to betray yourself, to stay, then leaving is not selfish. It's sacred. It's reclaiming your own gravity. Part 3. The illusion of hope. One of the most powerful traps in a toxic relationship isn't the pain, it's the hope, the belief that things will get better, the memory of how it used to be, the laughter, the passion, the moments when you felt seen. You hold on to those like proof that something real existed. And maybe it did. But here's the catch. You're not in a relationship with the past. You're in a relationship with what's happening now. And right now, you're exhausted. You're always waiting for them to change, waiting for them to understand, waiting for that magical conversation where they finally get it. But that day keeps moving further away. You keep shrinking just to keep the peace. You silence your voice just to avoid another conflict. You sacrifice your boundaries just to feel a moment of connection. And every time they give you breadcrumbs of affection, you eat them like a feast. That's not love. That's emotional starvation. You're surviving off scraps because your heart is convinced that if you just try harder, love them more, wait longer, things will go back to how they were. But the truth is, they won't. Because you're in love with potential, not reality. And potential is a dangerous drug. It convinces you to ignore patterns. It teaches you to normalize pain. It makes you believe that loyalty means staying even when you're breaking. But love isn't proven by how much suffering you endure. It's proven by how much truth you can hold, even when it hurts. And the truth is, if someone wanted to treat you better, they would have. Not one day. Not after you fix them. Not when you become more lovable. Now, you don't need to earn basic respect. You don't need to over-explain why you deserve consistency. You don't need to be perfect just to be treated like a person. Let go of the illusion. Because holding on to a fantasy of love is what keeps you from actually receiving it. Real love doesn't confuse you. It clarifies you. It calls you home, not into battle. Part 4. When love becomes a test. There comes a point when you stop asking, "Do they love me?" and start asking, "Why do I feel so small when I'm with them?" Because love, true love, should never make you feel invisible. But in some relationships, the entire dynamic turns into a test. Not of love, but of endurance. You start measuring how much pain you can take before you break. You learn to read the room like a survival skill, walking on eggshells, calculating every word, censoring your truth to avoid another storm. And when it's calm, you're not at peace. You're anxious, waiting for the next explosion. That's not stability. That's trauma bonding. It's when your nervous system confuses adrenaline with attachment. You begin to believe that the intensity of chaos is proof of depth, that pain means passion, that if you're hurting, it must be because you care deeply. But that's a lie. Real love isn't chaos. It's clarity. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't play hide and seek with your emotions. It doesn't love you one day and ghost you the next. If someone leaves you questioning your worth every time you speak your truth, that's not a safe space. That's a trap. And often, the most painful part is how much you blame yourself for it. You think, maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I'm expecting too much. Maybe it's my trauma talking. And so, instead of confronting the problem, you swallow it. You carry the weight of someone else's inability to love you properly. You rationalize their coldness, their distance, their emotional unavailability. Because facing the truth feels more terrifying than holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, they'll change. But the truth won't leave you. It knocks louder every time you ignore it. And here it is. You should not have to suffer just to keep someone close. Love doesn't ask you to lose yourself. It asks you to find yourself in the reflection of someone who sees your worth without question. So if you're constantly being tested, constantly bending, constantly afraid of losing them, maybe it's not love you're holding on to. but fear. And that kind of fear will cost you everything. Part 5. When leaving is love. You see, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave. Not out of hatred, not out of revenge, but out of self-respect. Because staying in a relationship that erodes your spirit is not loyalty. It's abandonment. Abandonment of yourself. You can tell yourself you're staying for the good times, for the history, for the hope that the person you fell for might return. But nostalgia is not a reason to suffer, and hope can become a prison when it keeps you chained to what hurts you. They won't always hit you with insults. Sometimes it's subtle, a disapproving glance, a passive-aggressive comment, a pattern of silence that says, "You're not worth responding to." You shrink a little more each time. You censor yourself. You question your instincts. You forget what it felt like to laugh without fear. You forget what it meant to feel safe, truly safe, in someone's presence. You become a version of yourself that exists only to be tolerated. But you weren't born to be tolerated. You were born to be seen, to be loved without preconditions, to be celebrated for your fullness, not reduced to fragments that fit someone else's comfort. And here's the hardest truth of all. Sometimes, the people we love the most are the ones least capable of loving us back in the way we need. That doesn't make them evil. It just means you have different capacities. Some people can only meet you at the level of their own healing. And if they haven't healed, if they don't even see the wounds, they'll bleed on you and call it your fault. But your job is not to fix them. Your job is not to be their therapist, their emotional punching bag, or their rehabilitation project. Your job is to protect your peace. Because the longer you stay in what hurts, the more you forget what healthy even feels like. The more you normalize pain, the more you train your body and soul to settle for survival instead of love. But healing begins the moment you say, "No more." That's not weakness. That's power. So if you notice the signs, if your soul is whispering that this isn't love, that this isn't safety, that this isn't who you are, listen. Because walking away is not the end of love. It's the beginning of finally choosing it. For yourself. Part 6. Maybe you've already seen the signs. The way they criticize you in front of others, but call it just joking. The way they make you feel guilty for taking time for yourself. The way every argument somehow ends with you apologizing, even if you didn't do anything wrong. These aren't accidents. They are red flags. And the longer you stay, the easier it becomes to convince yourself that this is normal, that you're being too sensitive, that maybe if you just change this one thing about yourself, they'll treat you better. But that's not how healthy love works. Love doesn't make you anxious. It doesn't keep you guessing. It doesn't punish you for speaking your truth. When you're in a healthy relationship, you don't feel smaller. You feel stronger. You don't walk on eggshells. You walk with confidence. And when problems come up, you're not afraid to address them. Because both of you are safe in the space you've created together. Contrast that with a relationship where silence feels safer than honesty. Where you replay conversations in your head wondering if you're too much. Where you can't even tell your friends what's going on because you're afraid they'll judge you. Or worse, confirm your fears. Let me be clear. If you feel the need to hide the truth about your relationship, that is the truth. Hiding is what we do when we know something is off, when we can't face it ourselves, when we're scared of what taking action might mean, the loneliness, the fallout, the identity shift. But staying in something that slowly erodes your peace is not loyalty. It's self-abandonment. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone the sacrifice of your mental health. And you sure as hell don't owe anyone the right to shape your sense of worth. Because here's the thing. Relationships aren't supposed to save you. They're supposed to support the version of you that's already worth saving. So if you're constantly justifying disrespect, reinterpreting red flags as misunderstandings, or feeling more confused than cared for, you already have your answer.